only now, when we have the technology that allows us to peer to the very essence of our existence, do we find a message that tells us that we are more than the differences that have separated us in the past. Or let me say it again, we're more than the differences that we have allowed to separate us in the past.
Welcome, USGU family. Oh my gosh, brothers and sisters from all over the globe. I know you love the conversations I've had with Gregg before. And guess what? He is back. I am so grateful, Gregg, to have you back on this show and to really dive in. Your next book, I just want to show it if you're watching on YouTube. Pure Human is pure genius. It is amazing. I'm so happy you're here.
Well, thank you, Julie. Last time we recorded, you were with me, sitting next to me in this very studio. You're the only guest that I've ever had sitting right next to me in this studio. And I also think it's safe to say a lot has happened since then, between then and now, in the world, certainly in our lives. And you have the rare galley, physical galley copy of the new book. They didn't even send one to me. My publisher did not send one of those. I have the digital copy, of course, I wrote it, but I didn't even get one of those. So I think that is so cool. They sent one to you.
I'm so touched. I didn't realize you didn't even have a copy. So
Well,
everyone listening, you're the first.
only really good authors get their galley proofs before they do the interviews. So, I don't know.
Uh, that does not apply to you, but that's all
Thank
right.
you.
I love
Thank you.
it. We are the first. So everyone who's viewing, you're the first to see this. This is so cool. I'm really honored. And, you can see it's like, God, lots. I was like, maybe I should just take a highlighter and like highlight things I don't want to highlight because it felt like the whole book. I was like this and this and this and this. I'm like, oh, Julie, goodness, we are
You
highlighting the
know,
whole book.
Julie, this was first, I'm going to acknowledge the platform we're using has just a tiny bit of a delay, and I apologize if I speak over your sentences. This book, the book is not available. It releases in January of this new year, January 28th. So it is available for pre-order, of course, on Amazon or wherever books are sold, but it's not available. So you have a physical copy of the book that I don't have. This book, I did something very different on this book that I have never done on any of the books I've written in the past. I actually took 7 months out of my life to write this book in my home studio, with the exception, I had a couple of programs I was contractually bound to speak publicly, but other than that, I wrote this book at home. Usually it happens on airplanes and airports and hotels, and that's all good. But I felt like the message in the book was so potent. I wanted to find just the right words to convey just the right ideas. And interestingly, I didn't pull anything back in writing this. In the past, there are things I haven't said because the publisher would prefer that we not go there. And I didn't do that with this book. I said, I'm going to write the book. If the publisher doesn't want this, I'll publish it myself. This is what I want to say. And I want to really give a shout out to Hay House because they did a 180 and came fully in support of the book, the message. They fast tracked it, and they gave me a lot of freedom, Julie. Very little editing has happened on this. There's some technical things, of course, grammar things, very little editing, and I really appreciate that because of the nature of the book. And we'll talk about the message and what it means, but I just want to say that right up front. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic and so, so beautiful, Gregg. And, and as reading through it, I was thinking, and a shout out to Hay House, for sending the galley copy to me. I still can't believe you don't have one yet. That's hilarious. But also, I was really noticing because we've spoken before, and I said, wow, this is you, this is your voice, and these are things that I know you may not have written or shared before that have come up in conversation to some degree, but you really
Sure.
went into depth. And I was thinking, way to go, Hay House, like really, way to go in supporting what you wrote. And I'll just share for people the name, Pure Human the hidden truth of our divinity, power, and destiny. And I'll just show the cover. It's such an awesome, I love this cover. Nice, well done. Um,
Can I
we're going
tell
to
you a
talk.
story? That's my
Yeah,
cover. I designed that cover.
no
We
way.
went back and forth in the initial covers they sent me. They looked like generic New Age book covers, and I said, "Come on, you guys, have you seen the
Yeah.
book? Do you know what it's about? You know?" And what I finally said, Julie, I had the honor of standing on the stage in Basel, Switzerland, recently in a stadium, 10,000 people in the stadium, and they had screens that were hanging all over the stadium because you can't see it if it's, one screen on the stage. And I said to the artist at Hay House, I said, I want you to imagine me standing on that stage. And when that book cover comes up on all of those screens around the stadium, I want to stand in the truth, and I want to be so proud to see that image up there. I don't want to make any excuses. And they said, okay, we got it. And I sent them my ideas, the colors. They sent me back a couple of revisions, and we were good. But before that, they were trying. It was just a very generic, new age looking. It's not a new age book at all. This is a
Yeah.
book based on the new discoveries, telling us that we are absolutely not what we have been told, and we're much, much more than probably we've ever even allowed ourselves to believe about ourselves. So. So I'm going to follow your lead. We'll unpack this in the time that we have, and I love this dance.
I do too. I'm so excited to dive into this, and I think this is a really perfect place to start. Even the what you're saying, the hidden truth of our divinity, power, and destiny. And I started taking notes about, I think it was
Mm,
truth number 8. What I love, I just want to tell people, and in the back of the book, you do a great job putting all the truths. There are these 70 truths that really bottom line everything that you're sharing so that this book is so, because there's a
mm.
lot of information, it's very digestible and it's just really well done. And so that number, I think it was truth number 8, divinity is part of us. That is ancient and timeless, where direct knowing, imagination, creativity, self-acceptance, and self-healing begins. That to me, I want to unpack, this hidden truth that we don't know. And I think divinity, I know we've touched upon it, but really to get into it from your studies and explanation would be powerful.
Well, thank you, Julie, and thank you for even taking the time. I know you're a busy woman; you got a full life. Thanks for even taking the time to become familiar with a book like that. This book, there are two parallel themes in the book. One theme describes in very clear detail, in a way that is honest, truthful, and factual. There's a concerted effort to replace our natural humanness, our biology, with technology. There's a concerted effort within the next 5 years, between now and 2030, to replace our biology with AI, artificial intelligence, chemicals in the blood, RFID chips under the skin, nanosensors running through our bodies, and more. And I'm going to share why this is important, uh, because once we give our biology away to the technology, we never get it back. Our bodies morph and adapt to the new conditions, and we no longer are the person, we're no longer the biology that we were before we made that choice. And I'm going to share why that's important and what it means in terms of human divinity. The second part of the book, the flip side, is the science, the new discoveries. They're just mind blowing, Julie, that are telling us, as I said, we're not what we've been told. We're not the powerless, weak, frail, fragile victims of a world that we have no control over. That there is something within us that is so ancient and beautiful and sacred and powerful, that there has been an effort to deny that part of our humanness for a very, very long time. We'll talk about that as well. But the new discoveries, I'll just share with you where the change began to happen in terms of the way that scientists think of the human body. Is in the past, we've always thought of ourselves, and we've been indoctrinated to think of ourselves as like sticky, wet, mushy, gooey, biological stuff in the cells. And so we think of ourselves that way, and all of the information is published in biology books. The shift and it started about 5 years ago, and this is pretty recent, is that scientists began looking at the human body from the perspective of IT, information technology. So a very different way of thinking, and seeing the components of the human body from an information technology perspective. And so all of the discoveries are published in these obscure engineering journals like IEEE, and the Journal of Advanced Computing and things like that, that most people simply don't see. So we'll get to this, but I want to say this is what really made the shift. What you're talking about, I think, is perhaps the most vital part of the book. So I'll use the word. We talked about this a little bit in a previous interview, and I fully acknowledge not everyone has seen although they should. They should see every Julie interview, but if they haven't, let's talk about the word divinity. So I'll acknowledge right up front, it comes with a lot of baggage for some people. They link it to religion, to religious traditions, and I can see why that has happened, because there are schools of divinity that have made those connections. The contemporary definition of divinity, and we do this right up front in the book, is that divinity is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. Okay, and that's it. So let's break that down. Transcend means to become more than, and I love this next part, Julie, perceived limitations. We may be living our lives, and most of us are living our lives within the limits and the confines and the perceptions of things that are simply not true. We've been programmed, we've been indoctrinated through family and culture and society and obsolete science, religion, I mean, all kinds of ways we get our indoctrination that tells us what is and is not possible in our bodies. For example, when we can heal ourselves and when we can't, is and is not possible in our lives. So divinity, there's a part of us that is ancient and timeless and all-knowing, and science is grappling with the evidence that supports this. That is our divinity. So when we talk about expressions of human divinity, what we're talking about, imagination is an expression of human divinity, creativity, innovation, love, empathy, sympathy, compassion, the ability to love without fear, the ability to forgive without the expectation of something coming back to us because we've forgiven. It's the absence of ego. These are all expressions of human divinity. Divinity is where we find our power in the earth realm. And divinity frees us from the fear that keeps us stuck and keeps us feeling small and vulnerable and susceptible to the ideas and the agendas of others. So divinity is a very, very powerful part of our lives. Now, I wanted to define that right off the bat because there is a concerted effort, as I just mentioned, to replace our natural biology with technology. What that does effectively is denies us our divinity. When we replace our natural biological systems, the neurons in the brain, the neurons in the heart, the intelligent systems in the body, the immune system and the reproductive system and other systems, with synthetics, Julie, and we can get into the specifics, but the bottom line is we veil the divinity that is available to us. Now, there's a bigger context to all of this, and I'm just going to lay it out right up front, then we can have a whole conversation about it. The effort to replace our biology effectively denies us our divinity. That is an expression of evil. All right, now I wanted to define this. We are living a fundamental battle between good and evil. It's been playing out since the first of our kind emerged on this earth. We talk about it, we joke about it. You know, sometimes it is more obvious than others. What's happening right now is we're living this little window of time between now and the year 2030, when the powers that be have identified a series of changes that they want to be complete on this planet, from the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, to governments. And what you're seeing are the power structures of the world where it looks like things are going crazy. They're not. There's a structure. The power structures of the world are jockeying for the best position to be in by the end of this 5-year window, 2030, so that they can best benefit from the changes that are happening. Those changes, they are proposing the changes not only in the world around us, but in the world within us. All right. And the only way to achieve the world that they are envisioning is for us to accept technology into our bodies. All right. Now that we've had this, we've got a bunch of pieces, let's pull them all together here. What we're seeing, and we now have a definition, evil, rather than it being some nebulous concept, evil is anything that denies us our divinity. Anything that denies us the ability to heal our own bodies, to imagine freely, to create, to innovate, to communicate, to share ideas and information with one another, to love without fear. Anything that denies that is an expression of evil. And what we're finding is that the proposals and the policies and the laws that are already being enacted to veil our divinity is a form of evil that leads us to the world that is envisioned by a handful of people that we never elected. You know, these are unelected people behind the scenes. We don't even know who most of their faces are, and they believe that they know better than we do what our world should look like. So you're seeing, and I wanted this, there's a sense of urgency, but I call it graceful urgency. We've got all the time we need to do whatever we need to do to preserve our humanness and to preserve our divinity. And if we're going to do it, now is the time, because we are going to be inundated with proposals, policies, mandates in these next 5 years that are going to make it look really, really sexy to adopt technology into our bodies. We're going to be told that it's safe, makes our world safer, that we'll be healthier. We're not going to be told about the consequences of giving our humanness away to machines and biology and technology. So the first part of the book describes that. The second part of the book is telling us that we are the technology. In many cases, our natural systems meet and exceed the capabilities, the capacities of the very machines they want to replace us with. We already do that stuff in ways that we're only beginning to understand. So this book is a celebration of our humanness, of our divinity. It is an invitation to love, and to love on a very, very deep level, to love ourselves. And my hope is not only an appreciation, Julie, for our humanness, but even maybe a step further, a sense of pride for what it means to be human. I personally am exceptionally proud to be a human, and of who we are and what we've accomplished and what our potential is. And once we give that away to technology, we can never get it back. We lose our humanness, we lose our divinity forever. It's not like a little dial where you can like turn it. And the word that is being used now for the replacement of biology with technology is transhuman. Trans means beyond, human. Just like transgender, trans beyond gender. You're moving beyond gender, moving beyond human. And the idea has been instilled into us, or at least since the end of World War II. We are all a product of this, that we are a flawed form of life. And because we're flawed, we need something outside of us to compensate or correct those flaws. And that something is being touted as technology, always has been. The difference now is that we actually have the tech that we never had in the past. We have the ability to edit our genes, to gene edit conception to determine exactly the outcome of a birth. We have the ability to replace these natural systems in our bodies. And each time we do that, we are denying a facet of our divinity. We're still here. We're still alive. But we are losing the ability for empathy and sympathy, and compassion, love, forgiveness, healing, to become a very different form of life. And I don't know about you, but I imagine you, me, most of our viewers don't want that, don't want to see our world descend into that. So our destiny, in the title, our destiny is to live the fullest extent of our divinity, of our humanness. And the beauty of this ancient, and I'll stop here, the beauty of this ancient battle is the old idea of battles are that there's these opposing forces and you have to do this. That old idea is what keeps us stuck in the fear and keeps us stuck in the conflict that we see unfolding in the world around us. What we're looking at is not winning. We don't want to win the battle between good and evil. We want to triumph in the battle. Triumph doesn't necessarily require conflict. Triumph means that we live the best version of our lives. We live, if the goal of the evil is to deny our divinity, then what we do is we live the expressions of our divinity to the fullest. We imagine freely, and we create, and we innovate, and we share ideas with other people, and we love without fear, and we forgive one another. Yeah. These are all empathy, sympathy, compassion, peace. These are all facets of divinity. By living our divinity, we triumph in this battle between good and evil. So that, in a nutshell, that's why I've written the book, and I wanted to lay that out so that we can, in one piece, so now we can tie into it rather than having it come up in separate pieces that may not seem like they fit together. Does that make sense if I say it that way?
Absolutely. And just, laying the foundation, first of all, so beautiful. I have a couple thoughts that I actually hadn't had before, and I want to share them with you, and then really look at kind of the first half of the book for people to understand a little more what this is going to look like, the transhumanism and I think eugenics and some of the things you mentioned, and then what we can do about it. And it's funny, I was thinking, my gosh, this is the whole point. When I had this USU idea, your USU is your divinity. It is your divine self. That's the whole, this is who we are inherently. And I was listening to you talk about, that our divinity is the absence of ego. And I'm a big fan of A Course in Miracles. I've done a lot of study with that, and it talks so much about, the importance of forgiveness and undoing the ego. And I just had this feeling, Gregg, I don't know if how you feel, but it's like, when we're in the good and evil, we're in that duality. And what I'm hearing and getting from what you're saying is, let's pull away from the duality and let's honor the godliness, the divinity that is the truth. And that means, you said it, that is the ability to transcend perceived limitations, and perception being the miracle, right? What we're perceiving can be a miracle or it can be ego. It can be fear, it can be love. So I'm just having all these like neurons firing together. Like, this is powerful. Yeah.
Well, I am happy that those connections are firing off. I'm going to acknowledge, first of all, for some people, I know it's a very different way of thinking. I acknowledge that. It's different. I was born and raised in northern Missouri in the Midwest of this big, beautiful country of ours. We used to talk about evil and good back then, but it was always kind of a joke and kind of a metaphor. People would always envision this little red devil on your shoulder that had a pitchfork and horns and a pointy tail, and then an angel over here, and they're doing this thing back and forth. And, we used to joke about it a lot. Evil is real. It is very real. It is more apparent sometimes than others in our lives because we are barreling down the road towards a time in our lives that has an expiration date. The powers that be, we could do a whole program on this, from the United Nations to the WEF, World Economic Forum, to other nations, to other agendas, to cosmological cycles and indigenous cycles. They're all converging on that 2030 timeline. Now, I'm not saying it's at noon, January 1st, 2030. I don't know, but that window. And they are pushing to remake the world in ways that we've never seen in the shortest 5 years is not long for social engineering, Julie, to remake the world the way they have envisioned. And sadly, the people that can least afford the magnitude of change that they're being asked to make are the people that it's going to affect the most, are the people that can least afford, have the least bandwidth to embrace that kind of change. They're the people that are living right at the edge of the fringes of society, paycheck to paycheck, relying on the world being just as it is right now. They don't have the bandwidth right now in their, first of all, emotionally. The magnitude of change that we're being asked to make is so very different from the world that we've seen in the past. And that's why there's a lot of pushback on these changes and the way they're coming around. So the level of social engineering requires us to relinquish parts of ourselves that we've never had to do before. Here's what I mean by that. We've always had the ability to change the world around us. And sometimes for good, sometimes not for good. I mean, we clear cut forests and hunt bison to extinction. But we've also engineered ecosystems to recover from natural disasters, and we've done some beautiful things as well. We've always had the ability to change the world around us. For the first time in human, not just recorded human history, all of human history, 200,000 years, we now have the technology to change the world within us. A very concerning series of presentations were made at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland in 2022, where the keynote speakers began by saying, for the first time, human biology is hackable, a hackable technology, and that we have what's called right, W-R-I-T-E, right level permission to change the code of human biology. That is computer programmer talk, and as a systems designer, I'm familiar with it. Right level permission means you've got access to the basic code that makes everything possible in a computer, or the basic code that makes everything possible in a human life, DNA. So they're looking at our humanness from the perspective of being able to intervene in what they believe are flawed codes to fix and correct them according to their mindset. And this is not one individual. This is an entire philosophy. It's a way of thinking for these people. For viewers that may not be familiar, I know you probably hear about this sometime. WEF, World Economic Forum. They've been around for a while. Their first meetings were in Europe. They typically meet in Davos, Switzerland every year, and there's a little blurb on the news about elites flying all of their private jets into Davos, Switzerland to talk about climate change, for example. And all the private jets are, all stacked up on the runway. They began meeting in 1971, and they were philosophers, historians, social scientists. There were CEOs of corporations, and they were talking about how to make business better in Europe. That was initially how they began. It evolved from that into a handful of elites that believe they know what's best for the planet and for all life on the planet. And the point of this is that we never elected them to represent us. And they are very much out of touch with the rest of the world. When we use the word elites, it's not a derogatory term, it's an explanation that when you are elite, by virtue of your elite nature, you are not plugged in to the everyday world of everyday people. You have privileges that prevent you or buffer you from being that way. So they believe that the world needs to change, and I think it probably does in some respects, and they believe the only way to achieve that change is for technological innovation, and what they call the fourth industrial revolution is what they're talking about. It's the term that's been given. So they've always had these ideas. They have every right to get together and bounce these ideas around in a smoky room somewhere and then fly home and do whatever they do. Here's what changed. In 2019, they signed a formal agreement with the United Nations. The United Nations has also been working on a program that remakes the world and remakes our lives. It's called the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2030, UN SDG 2030. If someone wants to look these goals up on the website, UN website, you can do it. 17 goals, and they are beautiful goals. I love the goals. Who wouldn't want to achieve these goals? A couple of examples. The goal of food security for the world. You know, who doesn't want food security? I do. Health for the children of the world. The end of poverty. I mean, who doesn't want those things? Now, don't be deceived. You read down into the fine print of how they plan to achieve those goals, and it is horrendous. It is nothing less than the remaking of the world outside of us, and here's the difference. For the first time, it can only happen if we agree to remake the world inside of us. They know that. It's no secret. They talk about it in the meetings. The media won't pick it up. You're not going to hear about it on CNN or Fox or MSNBC. But they don't make any bones about what they're trying to achieve. So now the UN has joined forces with the WEF, and the UN is now the implementing arm of the ideas that have been percolating in the WEF since 1971. Where that is concerning is that the United States and other nations of the world have agreed and have legally binding agreements to follow many of the UN protocols. So now it went from the ideas of a handful of people in some back room in Davos to very possibly becoming, and probably they're already doing this, a policy and law. And they're actually lobbying. They have lobbyists lobbying Congress, just like you would lobby for the pharmaceutical or the oil industry. They're lobbying congressmen to vote in favor of these changes. And that's what I want people to be aware of, because it's one thing to change the world outside of us. There's something so beautiful and unique and powerful and ancient and precious within us that we're only beginning to understand, that was given to us 200,000 years ago when we emerged. We are not the product of natural evolution. We've talked about that in other programs. The science fully supports that. They don't know what did happen, but they know that we're not the product of Darwin's idea of evolution. 200,000 years ago, we mysteriously appeared on Earth as a result of a series of mutations in our DNA and our genome that cannot happen in nature under natural circumstances. And the technical proceedings from National Academy of Sciences, technical papers, they all agree. These cannot happen in nature. And then they have to stop there because they don't know what to do with that. But the point is, those mutations are what give us our humanness, our ability for empathy, sympathy, compassion, the ability to self-regulate our bodies in the way no other form of life has ever been given. And when we begin to replace our natural biology with synthetics, we lose those gifts that we were given. We lose the essence of our humanness. And once that happens, we can never get it back. So we're on the precipice right now. It's not going to happen like in 10 years or 20 years. It's happening right now. Computer chips in the brain already have our FDA approval in the United States, 2023. They approved the implanting of computer chips in the human brain to talk to the computers without the use of a keyboard. RFID chips are already being accepted in European countries. Sweden is one of the first. And here's how they do it. They make it look so sexy, Julie. So, for example, there is an ad in Sweden. There's a man walking down the street, sky's blue, birds are singing. He is carefree, doesn't have a briefcase, doesn't have any car keys, because he has 15 RFID chips embedded into his body. And he says he's never been freer. One RFID chip starts the car. One opens the door to the security in his office. The other one, you go to the grocery store and he simply scans the RFID chip, over the scanner, and it links to his bank account. So this is already happening. This is already being accepted in Northern Europe. What we're not being told is the price that we pay, for the steep price that we pay for compromising our humanness to artificial intelligence, and to the other synthetics in our bodies. Let me just give a quick example. I mean, because I know these are nebulous concepts for some people. Let's talk about brain chips. When I was in school back in 1950s, 60s, early 70s. And we were taught then, and many young people are still being taught, that when you are born with a finite number of brain cells, X amount of brain cells, and that's it. And so this was leveraged when I was in college. They said, every beer you drink, you're going to destroy some more brain cells. So stop drinking the beer, and now we know this is not true. What the new science is showing us is that we're producing new brain cells up until the last breath we take on this planet. If we're 80 years old, if we're 120 years old, or there was a 134-year-old recently, it was just documented. They're still producing new brain cells, but there's a catch. And it's coming from part of the brain called the hippocampus. But there's a catch. And the catch is, unless we use those new brain cells, unless we engage them in a meaningful way, within about 7 days, within about a week, they will atrophy and die, because the brain believes if they're not used, they're not needed. That principle applies beyond the brain to the entire human body. It applies to the immune system. If we've got chemicals that are mimicking the immune system, the body thinks it doesn't need to produce that immune response. Reproduction, and we all joke about use it or lose it. I mean, that's a biological axiom, use it or lose it. So this is the drawback that we're not being told about. If you put a computer chip in someone's brain and they're using that with virtual reality, for example, then all the work is being done for them. They're not innovating, they're not thinking, they're observing what it is that's happening. And there are studies, now that this has happened long enough, there are studies of young people who have extended use of virtual reality goggles, young kids, maybe 3 years old, eat the breakfast in the morning, Captain Crunch or whatever it is, and their parents sit them in the living room, put on the AI goggles so they can be entertained. And those kids, they're seeing things in those goggles that they would never see in the backyard with their friends. Colors, sounds, situations for extended periods of time. And now this is published in the psychology magazines. Their bodies are stunted in growth. Their muscles began to atrophy. Their cognitive skills are stunted. Their communication skills, their ability to solve problems, to interact with other people, obviously. But the other side is there's a physical change in their brain. Their visual cortex, actually, the tissue actually grows and thickens, and it makes sense because that's the part of the brain that's engaged. Watching, observing, but not creating. I've got a younger brother, he's 4 years younger than I am. And maybe you can relate to this, I don't know. When we were kids, we go to the living room, we get a blanket out of the closet, out of the linen closet, and we go to the living room, we drape that blanket over a chair and a couch. And there was a space in between, and now you got a tent. Okay, but this tent wasn't just any tent. This tent was an outpost, an exploration outpost on a remote, uninhabited planet that we had just landed on. And then we put our raincoats on with the rain hood because they were radiation suits to protect us from the atmosphere, the thin atmosphere of this planet we just lived on. And the point, I mean, it's silly, it was fun, but the point is we were innovating and imagining and stretching our cerebral capacities rather than having it done for us in a video and watching it, not having to create it. So nobody's talking about this. When we replace our natural biology with technology, we begin to lose our natural skills and the systems begin to atrophy. And this is how we lose our humanness. Ultimately, it's how we lose our divinity.
I think what you are sharing, for those listening, I know you talk about the three different types of transhumanism and really understanding 2030. When it's funny, when I kept reading 2030, I'm like, 2030. And then I realized, oh my gosh, that's 5 years. That's
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah,
That's nothing. And that I keep thinking of the the Under Armour ad that says "Protect this house." Like protect this inner sacred temple, which I know you talked about in the book. The sacred DNA codes. We talked about that last time. It was so beautiful. Every time I read it, I get chills.
yeah.
The coding God eternal within us.
Well,
That's what
that's in the book. That's chapter 2 of the new book. Where,
I yes, say more because if anybody missed, I don't want to assume. I know people tend to watch
no,
all of these interviews, but in case they missed it, let's talk about that for a minute.
yeah, this, I mean, it could be a whole program unto itself. I'll just back up a little bit. I'm a scientist, I'm a degreed geologist, but I happened to become a geologist in a really interesting time in, in the history of technology when computers were coming out of the big rooms. It used to be a computer took up an entire room and these big mag tapes that you used to see in the old movies. And they were becoming more practical and they were being used in business on the desktop. And there weren't many people that knew how to program those computers. I had excelled in computer programming when I was in college as an earth sciences major, and it was a very unusual combination. And I ended up actually focusing more on the information technology than I did on the earth sciences as the years went on. So part of my background was in a form of programming called pattern recognition software. I was developing pattern recognition software. Just what it means. You can see patterns in natural systems. Well, it was at the same time, for the first time, that the human genome became available on a computer. You could pull it up and look at the stuff that we're made of digitally. And immediately, as a pattern recognition developer, I'd said, these are not random. Our DNA is not random. There are patterns in there. Patterns are information. And that led me on a journey to a 3,000-year-old text that I learned to read with an open mind a little differently. I had to cross traditional boundaries that separated linguistics and DNA and chemistry and biology, or I never would have been able to do what I was able to do. And the bottom line is, as a scientist, when I followed the instructions in the 3,000-year-old text, and that text is called the Sefer Yetzirah, literally translates as the Book of Creation. It's only been translated once into English. It's a book that is so mysterious that many rabbis don't even like to talk about it because it is so mysterious. It's relatively brief. There's only 1,000 lines. And it's as if an observer were watching the moment that earth and human was created. Step by step instructions. It's a very different way of thinking. I said, what if that book is a literal description? And I began interchanging the language of chemistry and genetics with the language in the book through a mathematic link. There's a numeric link that allows us to do that. The bottom line, to make a long story even longer, no, to make a long story, to make a long story very brief, is that mathematic link allows us to replace the chemical codes in our bodies consistently with the letters of our ancient root alphabets, cuneiform, Sanskrit, Arabic, and Biblical Hebrew, and others. And when you do that, a message emerges in the first layer of the DNA, and that message literally, it's not a metaphor, it literally reads as the words, God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body. It doesn't say who God is or where God came from, but what it tells us, and the reason I think this was important, it's not hidden. Only now, when we have the technology that allows us to peer to the very essence of our existence, do we find a message that tells us that we are more than the differences that have separated us in the past. Or let me say it again, we're more than the differences that we have allowed to separate us in the past, because it makes no difference what your gender or your sexual preference or the color of your skin or your culture or religion or race or creed. The message is the same. And the beautiful thing is it's encoded within each of the 50 trillion cells, approximately 50 trillion in every human body. And so when we forget who we are, we need look no further than the 50 trillion cells that we carry in this world every day. We are literally God eternal within the body. And just another step further, I've spent a lot of time in ancient traditions, leading groups into Rome and Greece and Nepal and Egypt and certainly the southern Andes of Peru and more. And one thing they all have in common are temples. They all have temples. And the temples of our ancestors were built in layers, the outer layers, the inner layers. And it was the innermost layer, the innermost sanctum, is where the deepest secrets and the greatest mysteries were always concealed. And the name universally given to that innermost sanctum was called the Holy of Holies. You go to Egypt and your guides will take you into the Holy of Holies, and they will do the same thing when you go to Greece. Well, our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions have always called the human body a temple. And if for someone who is biblically inclined, without, not religion, just from a historic fact, the book Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, I think it's 3:16. I'm doing this, I'm paraphrasing it, but I believe it roughly says, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God lives within you." And everybody says, okay, yeah, I'm temple of God, whatever. Now, the discovery that there's a message encoded into our DNA literally says that we are the vessel that houses that message. We are the temple. And rather than having a single Holy of Holies in one place, we've got 50 trillion Holy of Holies, because the nucleus of every cell contains the message telling us that we are God eternal within the body. For me, personally, the discovery of that, the recognition, I'm not going to say discovery because it's always been there. I didn't discover it. I recognized that it was there simply by following the instructions in an ancient text. We published a book in 2004 called The God Code. It was a New York Times bestseller. Also had a lot of pushback on that book. I had rabbis coming to me and saying, what gives you the right to share this when we've tried to hide this, to keep this message secret for hundreds of years? And I also had rabbis come forward like Zalman Schachter, is a revisionist rabbi, and fully supported. He said, if we're ever going to reveal this, now would be the time, when we are on the precipice of destroying ourselves and destroying our planet. It's good for us to know that we are God eternal within the body. And for me, Julie, I'll just speak on a personal level, it reinforced my sense of self-worth, that I'm worthy of the divinity that I have access to. I'm worthy of imagining just amazing imaginings and creativity, innovation. I'm worthy of being loved and loving others. And beyond that, I have the power to love. And where this has really made a difference, we do this in our live events. We walk people, lead them through step by step so they can derive this message for themselves. And one of the things that changes in people is when the life challenges meet them, come to their doorstep. Maybe it's a financial challenge, or maybe it's a medical diagnosis, or the loss. We're all experiencing loss of loved ones and relationships and ways of life. The question is not what am I going to do about it, but how does God eternal within the body deal with an issue like this? And that little shift in perception has the ability to change the way we address the problems, taking us from feeling small, weak, insignificant, and powerless to recognizing that we're wired for change. We're wired for love. We're wired for healing. We're wired for divinity. Now, just because it's there doesn't mean that everyone has to accept it, because we have free will and people have every right to deny their divinity, and many people will, because with divinity comes a responsibility. When you recognize the kind of power that the science is telling us we have within, we haven't even got that part yet. When you recognize that power, there's a responsibility that comes with how you use that power and what it means in your life. And there's some people that just, for whatever reason, are not at a place in their lives where they're able to embrace the truth of their power in the world, because life's been so hard. They say, if I have this power, how come these bad things have happened to me? Or, why am I in the situation that I'm in? So, and I fully acknowledge and recognize and embrace that. But this is why I go back to the way we started. There's a fundamental battle between good and evil. That battle plays out in every facet of our lives. We make choices every moment of every day. And now we have a benchmark for evil. Evil is anything that denies our divinity or denies us access to our divinity. So now we look at all the things that happen to us, all the bad things that happen and the good things that happen, and say, are those things, are they keeping me from my divinity? Have I allowed these forces to deny my own divinity? And this is how we triumph, by claiming our divinity. You don't necessarily have to fight. Sometimes maybe we do. The beautiful thing about the way this unfolds is we always have insights into the attempt to veil our divinity early on, where we can nip it in the bud easily without a fight. When we ignore those, whether it's a domestic abuse situation, whether it is a mandating of something happening inside of our bodies, of us accepting something into our bodies that we would never consciously accept in a million years if we really knew what it was all about. When we begin to recognize those things, we claim our power, we claim our divinity by honoring, protecting, and preserving our bodies. Because it's only through our humanness that we have access to our divinity. In this world, in this physical three-dimensional world, if you don't have a biology, you don't have neurons and DNA and cell membranes, you cannot access the information of your divinity. So I think this is important, because when we want to claim our divinity, we honor, protect, love, and cherish the gift of our bodies. And that's a message our young kids aren't getting today. And that was one of my hopes in writing this book, is that parents can find in their family language, because my language may not be their family language, but the ideas they can convey in their family language, just about how precious a human body and a human life really is. Maybe think differently about what goes into the body, what goes onto the body, and how the body is used.
To me, first of all, so much, I'm resonating with everything you're saying, and it's such a wake up call. What I'm really getting when I'm listening to you is this is a wake up for all of us, and everyone listening now and at any point. And you said something that I don't want to I want to highlight, because I think it's kind of like a North Star type of question, like a compass. You said the way that we can handle any kind of challenge, or the stories we have, or the hardships, is to ask this question. And I think this is it. This is not from the ego. This is from our divinity. You said, how does God eternal deal with this? And I think that is the question. So for anyone listening, when you're in doubt, my humble opinion is, that's the compass. That's your guide. And that's going to tell you, you're worthy because you're here. You're worthy because I think a lot of people, we struggle with, am I good enough? Worthiness, the indoctrination, the program of, not, of things that, maybe you've done mistakes and you got to atone. We get in this, and I think it comes back to the inner world and the emotional level, and remembering that the 50 trillion cells that are coded with this DNA message that is God eternal is within us, if that doesn't remind you, then go, first of all, that should do it. But that would do it. I think we talked last time about the divine booster. That is it right there. You got
Yeah.
trillions. But these aspects of our divinity, and I know we can get into this, but things like the powers that some of us are waking up to, some may not even realize, like your intuition, your ability to, compassion, sympathy, empathy, and imagination. I mean, who is it? Oh my God, Einstein talked about, imagination being the preview to miracles and changing the world. So I think to talk about our powers and how we access them and anything else that's coming up, but this is
Yeah,
so
well,
powerful.
when we talk about evil, everybody has heard of evil, and they think of evil, as maybe somebody hurting someone else. That's evil. There are many expressions of evil, and deception is the key to our time in history. We are all casualties of deception. There is psychological evil, and that is playing out through the information silos and the algorithms that are leading us in social media to have perceptions and make decisions that benefit the powers that be based upon the false misinformation and disinformation that we're fed but we're so convinced that they're true because the algorithms cleverly inundate our inbox with the same stories again and again and again and again. So that is a form of evil. There is biological evil, where we taint the human body to the point that it can no longer access its divine functions. There's technological evil, replacing the human body in mass with technology. And this is one of those cases. I just want to emphasize this. As a scientist, this is the 47th year I've done this work in one form or another. And as a scientist working in the corporations, I saw this principle again and again. The technology itself is never good, bad, right, or wrong. It's the thinking underlying how that technology is applied. So I've already spoken here briefly about computer chips in the brain. That can be a beautiful technology. So, for example, a man or woman dedicates their lives to this country on a battlefield halfway around the world, and they come home without arms and legs, maybe one arm or two arms or legs, or some of them have lost all of them. What a beautiful thing to have a computer chip in the brain that communicates with the prosthetics that are now available, robotic arms and legs, and now all of a sudden you can hold your baby in your arms, and you can brush your own hair, brush your own teeth, and feed your own face. And what a beautiful thing. I mean, as a case-by-case isolated situation, I would fully support that. The policies that are being written are to insert computer chips into the brains of all newborns by the year 2030. They say to give them the edge so that they can compete in the world and be the best version of themselves. Not acknowledging that by doing that, the repercussions of what it means to accept that chip into your body. What does it mean to your other biological systems? And the technical people I talk about, and I talk to people about this. I said, this is amazing technology. What does it mean for society? And I've literally had them say to me, "Don't ask me that question. It's above my pay grade. I'm an engineer. We're going to push this technology as far as we can. Talk to someone else about the social implications." And that is the thinking. So I'm not saying that the technicians are bad people. These are techies. they're given all the money and all the equipment to push this as far as they can. The technology is advancing faster than the morality of how we use it in our society. And that's our responsibility to reel that in. And how can you do that if you don't know? If you don't know what's happening, if you don't know what the implications are. And so that's one of the takeaways from, hopefully, from this book. So, and I'm going to go back. Julie, we have time. How deep do you want to go with this? How deep do we want to go?
As deep as you are willing to go, Greg.
Well,
'cause
it's your community and your podcast. Do you mind if we take this a little bit deeper?
I think absolutely to go deeper and also to get to some of the powers that I don't know that
Yeah,
people realize we
this will
have.
take us this will
Yes,
take us
I'm all
to
for let's highlight our
Yeah.
power. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's I think everyone knows there's something missing in our story. There's something, I mean, the events of the world, it looks like the world's going crazy for no apparent reason. And that scares people. They just think systems are popping off and collapsing randomly, spontaneously for no apparent reason. Well, there is a reason, there is a structure, and there is an expiration date, there is a timeline. And for me, knowing that helps. Doesn't change what's happening, but it knows, number one, it tells me that it's not going to be this way forever because it's unsustainable. Something's got to give. And that something's going to give around the year 2030, within 5 years or so. Ramping up to that, we're going to be encouraged, strongly encouraged, to change our bodies and to change our world in ways that we've never seen. And people say, well, why? What is the reason? I think one of the best ways, there's so many ways to approach this, but one of the best ways, I'm going to go right back to the Dead Sea Scrolls. We've talked about this maybe in some other conversations. I think most reviewers are familiar with the scrolls. They were discovered in 1946, 47, the oldest records of the oldest unedited records of the Old Testament. There were 11 caves. They're still finding fragments in 2023. They're still finding new fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's not over yet. But what happened, 1946, the first cave, you can't make this up. In the first cave and the first vase that was pulled out of the first cave and the first scroll that was pulled out of the first vase is the reason for this whole conversation that we're having right now. And it's probably no accident that translation of that document, although it was made, the discovery was 1946, it was not allowed to be shared with the public until 1991. The Vatican worked to prevent that. There were political organizations that worked to prevent that. And you say, what could possibly be in a 2,500-year-old scroll that would warrant that kind of time and energy and money to prevent that? And the answer is in that first scroll. It literally is titled the War Scroll, W-A-R. And the War Scroll literally says that we are engaged. It's ancient, but it's not obsolete. We are currently engaged in a battle that they identify between what the scroll says are the sons of darkness and the sons of light. That's the battle between good and evil. And it's interesting because it's very detailed, tremendous detail, 19 columns in this scroll, tremendously detailed. Describing the battles. 3 battles will be won by the sons of light. 3 battles won by the sons of darkness. That's only 6. There's 7 battles altogether. In the 7th battle, the good news is the sons of light win the 7th battle, but there's a catch, because the sons of light win the 7th battle through divine intervention that is possible because they have accepted their own divinity. By accepting our power, we open the door to a greater force. My mom, before she left this world, used to tell me, even into her last days, and I think this is exactly what she was saying, and you've all heard this before, God helps those who help themselves. God helps those. It's not, you can't sit around and say, hey, fix this. When we make the effort to become the best version of ourselves, that opens the door to us, our feeling that we're worthy of accepting something from a greater source, whatever people, however they want to think of that. And there are a million ways. Some people think of angels and demons. Some people think of of ancestors and higher forces. Some people say ETs and aliens, ancient texts. They're all the same thing coming together. And when we become, here's the bottom line, when we become the best version of ourselves, we open the door to the capacity of accepting the gift that allows us to triumph in this battle between good and evil. So how do we do that? And this is, I think, what you're talking about. The new discoveries. I don't even know where to start. There's so much. Well, I started already because I described that the new science is looking at the human body from an IT perspective, information technology, rather than the biology. And when we do that, Julie, it's a mind blower because we literally, 50 trillion cells, we've already established that. Every cell has a little tiny electrical potential, 0.07 volts. Do the math, 50 trillion-ish times 0.7, and you get about 3.5 trillion-ish volts of electrical potential inside of it. Potential. It's not real, it's potential. But what if we could harness that and apply it to our healing or our intuition or our resilience in life or our longevity or super memory, super learning, super cognition, and all the things that we can do? But it doesn't stop there because now they know, this is so cool. The engineers watching this, every cell in the body, rather than thinking of it as the sticky, wet, mushy, gooey stuff with things floating around inside, our cells are literally gated circuits, G-A-T-E-D, gated circuits. It means they have an input, they have an output, and the information that comes in is massaged through biological equivalents of transistors, resistors, capacitors. We've got those in our cells. But it doesn't stop there because every cell is reading the photons of light that come in from the world around us, and we are photon emitters. We are emitting light. Photons are particles of light, and light is information. So it means we're emitting information and receiving information. Every cell in the body, the membranes of the cells store information just like we store it on the computer chip. This is a beautiful one. I mean, we go on and on with this, but I just want to share this. Every successful genetic transaction in our species is recorded in the genome of each individual. That is called distributed networking. All right, every successful genetic we have a history. If I were to read your DNA or you read mine, you would see all of the genetic transactions from our ancestors from 200,000 years ago are part of our genome. The terms that are used, that information, first of all, it is transparent because if you know how to read, it's right there. It's not hidden. It is immutable because it is distributed throughout every member of the human species. Wait, we're not a race, we're a species. People say human race. There's a Caucasian race or a black race or a white race or a red race, but we are a species, the human species. And it is secure. And if that sounds familiar, if anyone is listening and they've heard of a technology that is transparent, immutable, and secure, it is the technology that is revamping information storage, the financial systems, decentralized finance in the world today. It's called blockchain technology. Blockchain technology, its benefits, it is transparent, it is immutable, it is secure, it's never been hacked. Never once has it been hacked. The platforms have been hacked, like a bank can be hacked, but the dollar's not hacked. The platforms are hacked, but the blockchain, the Bitcoin, for example, has never been hacked. So we're building technology in the world around us that mimics what we already do in our bodies. And this is an emerging worldview that's showing us that we are trying to remind ourselves of something important that we need to know about ourselves by building it in the world out there. And by building that technology out there, it's reminding us of what we are in here. So when I'm with young people in a live event, this just happened a couple of weeks ago, they are taught to worship computer chips and artificial intelligence. That's God. That's the new God. And I said, okay, computer chips, they're fast? Absolutely. They are efficient? Absolutely. How far can they scale? How far can you bump up the capacity of these chips? Well, the answer is that a silicon chip, for example, which is what most of them are made of now, will never process information faster than the information can move between the atoms that make silicon what it is. The physics of the silicon is the limit. So is it fast? Yes. Efficient? Yes. Scalable? It is finite. Now, look at the human neuron. Human neuron, is it fast? Yeah. Is it efficient? Yeah. Is it scalable? What is our top end? And the answer is we don't know. And we don't know because every time scientists push us to the edge, push a neuron to the edge of what they believe is the limit, we do what humans are designed to do. We morph and adapt to that limit to open the gateway to an entirely new vista of possibilities. And we do it again and again and again. It appears that our scalability is infinite. We are infinitely scalable. And that's just with the neurons. It happens with the whole body. And then scientists at Stanford University did a really interesting experiment. They compared a human brain to a miniature processor unit, a microprocessor. And it's interesting because the number of synapses in the human brain, the synapses between the neurons where the information travels, it's about the same as the number of transistors in a microprocessor. So they're comparing. Here's what they found. I know you don't want to hear the whole study. The bottom line is that the human brain is 100-fold more efficient than the processor, that microprocessor, right now. Now, where all of this might change, Julie, we're having this conversation in the middle of December of 2024. Late last week, the tech journals announced a new chip that had just been released called Willow. And the Willow chip is the first quantum computer processing chip. And the experiment showed that the chip solved a problem in 5 minutes that the fastest supercomputers we have today that are not quantum would take 10 septillion years to solve. And we don't even know what 10 septillion looks like. I think it's a 10 with something like 250 zeros or something. I'm not accurate on that. But the point is we have now quantum computing is coming into vogue. But here's the beauty. That's exactly how the human body and the human brain work. We work on that. We're not linear analog. We are quantum. We access information multidimensionally, fractally, holographically, and now they're building the chips that mirror what we continue to do. So the point of this is that in many cases, we meet and even exceed the capacity of the technology we're being asked to place into our bodies, yet that technology denies us access to our divinity. Because if it is not a natural biological cell, it cannot access the information that allows us imagination, creativity, forgiveness, compassion, all of those things. So literally, we are the technology. We are the technology we've been waiting for. And I think the value of knowing that is once we recognize that, I think we'll feel less of an urgency to replace what we are with the stuff outside of us. We'll still use the technology. But I think we're moving into a point now where we're going to have to make some choices before we give our humanness away. So, and I want to talk about where I think the world is going. But before I do that, I just talked for a lot, and I apologize. But does that make sense when we talk about those capacities? So they demonstrate why deep intuition is possible. Why a mother in Brisbane, Australia, can know that her son in Afghanistan, his convoy has just hit an IED and they're having problems. She can know that. She calls the commanding officer of his unit and says, "Is my son okay?" And the commanding officer doesn't even know that anything's happened yet. How does that happen? Or here's another one. Here's a really good one. And I talk about this in the book. There was a psychic in the 1980s, a very well-known psychic. His name is Ingo Swann. Many people are probably familiar with him. he worked with Stanford Research, SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and a gentleman named Russell Targ. And I had the privilege of knowing and touring with Russell Targ in the early 90s, along with some other Michio Kaku, Russell Targ, the sixth astronaut on the moon, Edgar Mitchell. I mean, just amazing, amazing people. And Ingo Swann was the psychic that helped to develop the military protocols for remote viewing. So remote viewing is the ability to see what's happening in another physical location or in the future or in the past or in another world. It doesn't have to be on Earth without leaving the room you're sitting in. That's remote viewing. And at that time, the space program, NASA, was developing a probe that was going to go and check out Jupiter, find out what's really up with Jupiter. And he said, you know, before that probe sends back the information, let me remote view it first. And then the probe will send back the information and we'll compare it and see how accurate this, because remote viewing is a state of deep intuition, is what's happening there. So he did his remote viewing, and what he showed, he had drawings and he showed Jupiter with rings around Jupiter. And at that time, the experts around him said, oh, well, you must have overshot your target to the next planet, which is Saturn. And we all know Saturn's got rings because Jupiter has no rings. So the photographs came back from the spacecraft and they showed that Jupiter has not only one, but multiple rings around Jupiter. We don't see them from Earth because Saturn's rings are made of ice that reflects the light. They're easy to see. Jupiter's rings are made of it's like earthly material, earthen material. You know, I don't want to say rock, but it's not made of ice, so it's harder to see. The point is, he was so accurate in his remote viewing, he knew it before the space probes ever sent it back. Those are examples. We think those are extraordinary, but our ancestors called them ordinary. They were an ordinary part of everyday life. So, you know, these are all facets of potentials. And I talk about these in the book. I talk about true life stories. So I wanted to talk about where we're going, but I want to just pause for a moment and just ask you if, I know we're covering a lot of ground. Does it make sense the way we're doing this, Julie? You okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I just can't even believe. I feel like your intuition is just right there with mine. I mean, these were the questions I was going to ask you. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's talking about
See,
the remote viewing and that.
That's because we're tuned in. We're in the divine matrix.
Yes, I was like, oh my gosh, Gregg, literally, yep, that question and that note and that person. And so you are, you know, I not every interview do I do this way. There's so much beautiful material in this book. I'll just show it up one more time. I love the cover. And I needed to kind of get some grounding. And I just want to say what's happening here. We are in sync because you literally covered the questions and what I wanted to ask you about.
Oh, well, so we did our work really well together. That means we loved our community well together, because this is what we're doing. We're loving up our community by sharing a deep truth, not just of who we are, but there's a deeper context in the world around us.
Yeah.
And the beauty of all of this, once you know that this ancient battle is happening. And by the way, I did a program a few weeks ago, and a woman was very offended and stood up in the middle and yelled through the whole room to let me know she was offended by the terminology, the sons of darkness and the sons of light, because she was a feminist and felt that the feminine was excluded. I just want to clarify, 2,500 years ago, they were not debating gender the way we are today. Yeah. And it was understood that sons of darkness and sons of light was inclusive of masculine and feminine. Yeah. Maybe not the best language. That's where they were 2,500 years ago. So it's humankind. We're all included in this. Once we recognize that that's happening, the beauty is you can let it go. You don't have to dwell on it. And the way that we don't want to necessarily win this battle. We want to triumph. And the way we triumph is by living our best life, living our divinity, loving without Loving without fear, that's different than just loving. We all know how to love. But how many of us have been so hurt in love in the past? And there are many different kinds of love. It can be an intimate human love with another person. It can be love for a pet that we cherish, that we've lost, or we will all lose the things that we most cherish in this world. And those are our experiences of love. How many of us are willing to enter into a love that is so deep that we surrender our fear of not being hurt in exchange for maybe something greater that we could never achieve on our own? That is an expression of divinity. And I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good, or bad. We all have to make sense of what that means in our lives. How many of us are willing to forgive just for the sake of forgiveness? Or when we forgive, do we look around and see who saw us forgiving, or we expect the person, the object of the forgiveness, to acknowledge us? I learned this with my father. My very dysfunctional, abusive, alcoholic father and our dysfunctional family. Before he died, we had very poor communication, and I wanted him to know. I just wanted to be. I didn't even care if he was a father. I just wanted to be a friend. I just wanted to acknowledge him as a human, and let him know that I didn't hold any hard feelings about what had happened. And I recognized I was expecting to hear something back, and I never did. And that was a very powerful experience for me I performed my forgiveness from my perspective. I didn't necessarily need his acknowledgement to know that I had accomplished that. And how many of us have that? These are all expressions of divinity that we don't think about. The ability to heal our bodies. Our bodies cannot heal if we do not believe that we, first of all, are worthy of our own healing, and that can be conscious and subconscious. And that's why the work you do is so beautiful, Julia, and I so appreciate what you do. And then even if we feel worthy, knowing that it's even possible. And divinity tells us every organ in the human body is now documented with the ability to heal itself. Every organ, every gland, every tissue, even the ones we were told could not. Heart tissue, pancreatic tissue, spinal cord tissue, brain tissue. But there's a catch, as there always is. And the catch is they have to be, those tissues and systems, glands and organs, they have to be bathed in the environment that supports their healing. Now, that environment can be the external environment. Sure, good food, good water, all that's important. Nutrients are important. The most powerful environment is the emotional environment, because the emotional environment is speaking to the chromatin, which is the protein packaging around the DNA that allows the DNA, determines how well the DNA can express. When the DNA can fully express its the template, its blueprint, we call that healing. And our emotions are directly linked to that chromatin. So when we are able to transcend our perceived limitations, that's divinity, and that is where our healing begins. So in a very real sense, it's not that divinity is a part of our lives. Divinity is our lives. We are divine beings, and we are learning greater expressions. We all have expressions. We're learning greater expressions of our divinity through what life brings to our doorstep. And now we know all that's happening within this. I'm a systems thinker. I'm looking at the big picture. The big picture is this fundamental battle of a force that wants to deny our divinity. So that happens through our programming, through our indoctrination in school and religion and media and what we call news programs and all those things. I've got a whole chapter on how to break the spell of technology, the God spell of technology, and case histories. It's akin to deprogramming from a cult, not OCCULT, but a cult. And I'm giving case histories of how you do that and what the remedy is, because we are all programmed to some degree to accept information into our lives. It's not good for us. It's not good for our world, and it's not good for our species. And our divinity allows us to transcend that, to become more than our perceived limitations. Other than that, it's pretty light time reading in that book. You just
Yeah, bedtime. Yeah.
no. I wrote this for everyone. I wrote it for I have friends that drive trucks. I have friends that are homemakers. I have friends that are farmers. I have friends that are engineers, that are scientists, computer programmers. And it's for all of us because we're all in this together. It's all about us. It's not a highly technical book. But for example, chapter 2, where we derive the message in the DNA, there's a jump point. I have a point there, and I said, if you do not want to see the details of how this happens, skip ahead, and I think it's to 20 pages, and then you can pick up with the benefit. You don't have to see how it all happened. If you want to see it, because your brain needs to see that, here it is. And I think in that way, the reader has options in terms of what they get to hear and what they don't want to engage with.
You ended, not to jump to the end, but I think this is really pertinent. The 70 truths, you really bottom line what you're teaching so beautifully and powerfully. And I was really moved. I wrote this down. Number 70 is the choice is ours. And there's a lot of wisdom in that, because the truth is, we forget that choice. We have free will. And I think what you're saying, it's so I'm just feeling for our community, for everyone watching, brothers, sisters everywhere. Our prayer, I'll just say, is you really make the choice to honor your divinity. As you said, Gregg, it's not something to find or to seek. It is you. It's like God is, you are.
Well, when we remove all that's not true, all that remains is our divinity. So when you remove the lies and you remove the false perceptions and the obsolete beliefs, when you remove the fear, all that's left is what's true, our divinity. And that number 70 that you're talking about it's up to us to choose. That is the culmination of the sentences that come just before that. What it is that we're being asked to choose. And really, I just want to say this to our community, because I recognize that's a very different way for some people to think. It's a lot of information, may not be your language. You don't have to know everything that we just talked about. It gives a context and it gives meaning to the craziness and the chaos in the world. But the bottom line, it's all about love. And the question is simply, do we love ourselves enough to accept the deep truth of our humanness and the responsibility that comes with our divinity? And it's not a question that you answer with words. We answer that question by the way we live our lives, the choices we make. Every moment of every day, we either affirm or deny our divinity. We affirm or deny life in our bodies. We either eat crappy food or we eat food that gives life to our bodies. We either speak kindly to another person or we dishonor and we denigrate them. We either succumb to the primal emotions of hate and revenge and fear, or we rise to the deep truth of our ability to be objective in the world. For example, we're just coming out of a very difficult election here in the United States. It was hard for everyone. Everyone. I don't think anyone had an easy time in this election. I have dear friends who, to this moment, have allowed their hate for an idea that has been perpetrated through media, perceptions that allowed their hate for those ideas that may or may not even be true, to blind them to the beauty and the good and the love and the possibility of the world that is emerging around, because they're tunnel focused, tunnel visioned on that hate. So what has happened is they have succumbed to the urge to be reduced to their most primal instincts of revenge or hate or fear. Those are forms of evil. And evil, and so I'm saying evil has many, many faces. And the beauty is that we can transcend that in a heartbeat. transcend it in a heartbeat. Maybe it's a global lesson. Maybe we need to be pushed into that to know that we can transcend it. Maybe that's how we heal. Julie, who am I to say? I don't know the answer to that. I recognize it happens, and there are some people that no longer speak with me because I've written this book, and they are afraid of what I've said. Now, my sense is that the pendulum has swung so far in one extreme. It's gonna come back, and I love the people that no longer speak to me, and they're still my brothers and sisters, and I'm waiting with open arms whenever we can come back and celebrate our humanness and the joy of what it means to be here. We're wired for this time right now, and that's what makes it so exciting. Yeah.
I love what you just said. Can I add one thing that you said that I think is
Yeah.
really important? And that is, it may have been glossed over, and it kind of lit up for me. The real power is focusing on love. When we focus on hate, it gets us in our ego. It gets us in that place. You could call it evil, right? And you said something really important that I really feel is the larger lesson. And you were talking about your father, and because I think many of us on a very like micro level, we have different grievances and issues and challenges. And so you had a father that was hurt, was alcoholic, was not involved, and you chose to forgive him even though he never responded. You
Yeah.
got that clear piece for yourself. And I just got this image of I believe, the bridge to go from hate to love. This is not new thought, but it is
No.
deciding we're going to forgive at a
Well,
level that is not just the old fashioned forgiveness, but that's at a deep level. Like you said, I'm going to honor your divinity, even if you don't see it. And even if you've forgotten it, I'm going to see it and hold it for you. That's what I got.
well, thank you for seeing that, Julie. Thank you for recognizing that and for sharing that. Where that comes from, I think all of our viewers would probably agree there's a lot of hurt in the world right now. We
Yeah.
we are the product of a century of some of the deepest hurts that you can ever imagine. And those hurts we all hurt from time to time. The key is the hurt resolved? So when you see unresolved hurt, because the tools, they just don't have the tools to resolve that hurt. When you see unresolved hurt, that often becomes fear. And the fear that is felt then is expressed as hate in the world. My
Mm.
father did not like this world, and he didn't like me. He didn't want me. He told me that. He encouraged my mom to have an abortion in a time when women risked their lives having an abortion. And my mom fought for my life in the womb, which is why I was so privileged to fight for her life in her late days of late stage dementia. I got to advocate for my mom. She
Mm.
never took anything in her body that wasn't good for her. I wouldn't allow it. And in that way, we were like bookends. She fought for me in the beginning, and I fought for her in her end. And when you look at it that way, and my father was the product of a lot of hurt. So when you see the hate that you see in the world right now, what it says to all of us is that our global family is deeply enmeshed in hurt. That our global family is hurt, and they're struggling to resolve that hurt. And when you begin, it doesn't make excuses for what happens, but it helps to make sense of why it's there. And the question is, what do we become in the presence of the hate that is directed toward us? And that's a deeply spiritual choice. If we need to fight back on that hate, and we've talked about this in another program, if we need to fight back, do we fight back? Do we succumb? Do we lower ourselves to those primal instincts and fight back because of our fear and our hate for the perceived enemy in front of us? Or do we still fight, but it's from the love of the family behind us and the truth and the beauty of what we know is possible in the world? Same outcome maybe, but two very different motivations. And these are the spiritual principles, I think, that are up for us all right now. So ultimately, it does come down to love. Do we love ourselves enough to embrace, to accept our humanness, our divinity? And if the answer to that is yes, then our task, our workshop in life becomes really clear. It is to protect, care for, love, and cherish the gift of our bodies, of our humanness, because our body is what makes our divinity possible. So those are some very concrete things that we can anchor in our lives every day. Do I love myself enough to embrace the truth of my divinity and the responsibility that comes from that? And most people will say yes. And if it is, then how do I implement that every day? How do I care for myself? And how do I honor and cherish and protect the gift of my body that holds the message, God eternal, within this body? And everybody has their own answer to that. But it takes it away from the philosophical, I think, more into something more practical, because it means every day, every choice is going to either affirm or deny divinity in our bodies. Yep.
So beautifully said. And I want to say, I'm amazed that we took your book and somehow, I mean, there's so much in there. And I feel
And
like you gave a beautiful,
oh well,
very,
that was just chapter one. We just did chapter one. See
we
now
only did,
now we got to do part two. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
we'll do, yeah, you know me, I'm always up for the part, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's hysterical.
Well, we'll do okay. Julie and Greg's big fun podcast of on Pure Human version 2 at some point after in the new year. Okay.
I love it. I'm game. And this, you know, this is going to release right as your book releases. So that was that
Ah,
was timed
thank you.
to do that so that and we'll have for everyone listening, all the links will be in the show notes, in the description on YouTube, and highly recommend this book. I mean, it's very readable, and I had, you know, I use my body as a sign of I had chills through so
Mm.
much of this book, Greg. I was like, oh my gosh, like if people just knew. That's why I was so eager. I'm always so eager to talk to you and just to bring your wisdom and your heart, because I feel like it's this important reminder that's grounded in also in science and statistics and information that you can kind of sink your fingers into and get, that saying, do not underestimate the power in each of us, the divinity, the God force that is you, that is me, that's anybody watching at any time. I don't care who you are. And to preserve that, to honor that, to protect that. And that really, you've given this. Well, I remember when you were writing it, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to read this. And here we are. Yeah.
You were here when I was writing it over the summer in
Yes.
this
Yes.
very studio. You were here.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
know. I remember. And I was like, oh, I cannot wait to like really dive into this book. And it's beautiful. It's a piece of art. It's a grounded, beautiful, wise piece of writing that I think is also, to me, anytime we can remember who we are. I know these are part of the truths you wrote about, and recognize that, and let fear dissipate, and reclaim who we are, our divinity, our God force. To me, you know, God is at the center of it all. The
Mm.
divine is we're of that. You've done that in a very beautiful way, and I'm grateful and honored to share this and to our community all over the world. You know, this is a gift, what you've talked about.
You know, it means a lot, and especially coming from you, because you're a dear friend and
Mm.
you're a very wise woman, and you have a beautiful heart. And your opinion of that book, not a lot of people have seen the book, and it's good for me to hear that. So thank you. I didn't know how it was going to land in the world, and thank you, Julie.
So I will just answer or ask my last question would be, this is what I usually answer. Then you
Okay.
might be like, nope, we're good. Is there anything that I did not ask you, or anything intuitively, like I think, you know, heart flare, where your
Yeah.
heart's like, hold on. Is there anything, Greg, to complete this conversation that just feels like is there wanting to be said for our
Not
community?
really, Julie. You did such a beautiful job, and I want to thank you for your kindness in allowing me to complete a thought that maybe took 5 or 7 minutes, so that we could complete that. I think, again, my prayer is that the reader walks away with a deeper appreciation, at the very least, a deeper appreciation of their humanness in a time when it's being denigrated in mainstream and certainly in academia. We're being taught, that we are flawed and need something outside of us. And maybe even beyond that appreciation, I think that sense of pride, I think it's a good thing to be proud of our humanness, because it then helps us to care and care for and protect what we've been given, and maybe to even think about how we can best love the world through our time in this earth and our bodies. How can we use our bodies? How much good can we do in our lives through these temples that we were given 200,000 years ago, and that opens up the door to a lot of possibilities. So thank you for that opportunity to share that.
So beautiful. Thank you so much, Gregg. And I'm just going to say this last little bit to you, our beloved listener, brother, sister, wherever you're finding this. May you also remember to take that vision and to bathe yourself with this reminder that you are the divine, and may you see that in everyone. And when you don't see it, pause and allow yourself, like Gregg said earlier, to ask, what would the God eternal, the divine, how would the divine look at this person in this situation? And to look at the unresolved hurt, to give yourself the space and grace to do that, so that we can all really shift our love for ourselves, reminder of our divinity. And with that, bless you. Thank you for being here with us. Gregg, thank you for being a dear brother, friend, wise teacher, and spiritual guide, and all those things. Love, love, love having you here always.
Oh, Julie, thank you. I am dealing with allergies today, and I am so grateful for you to work with me through an allergy-ridden day to be able to share the message. So God bless you. Beautiful, just beautiful new year to you, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you all for doing all you're doing to be the best version of yourself and create the best world possible. We love you all. I look forward to our next.
I'm so grateful to be part of your journey, being your USU. Wasn't that an amazing conversation with Gregg Braden? I am so grateful that we're here together, and I want to share something. I have opened the doors to my 12th cohort of my Intuitive Life Designer Coach Certification Program. It's a premier program. We have students from all over the world, and it is all about really learning how to unlock your soul's purpose, learn how to help others do the same, and really actualize your pure human gifts, divinity, and all of the reasons that you are here on planet Earth right now. We are closing the doors really soon because this next 12th cohort starts in a few days. So if this is a soul calling, maybe this is your sign, I would love to have you and welcome you. I teach this entire 4-month course live myself. I have incredible mentor coaches. I've been teaching the fundamentals of coaching for over a decade. And this program also weaves in how to access your intuition and other healing arts. So if you're interested, go to juliereisler.com/certification and make sure you check out. There's bonuses. It's an incredibly rich and amazing program. It's my premier program, and I'd be honored to help you unlock your intuition, to help you design your best life and learn how to do this with others. This is the kind of career you can take and do anywhere at any time. It is just such a gift to be able to truly step into your pure human gifts and to help others do the same. So any questions, let me know. Otherwise, go to juliereisler.com/certification. And either way, my friend, blessings always. And here's to honoring your divine self.